What if Pong was a story of war?
Chapter 1. The Echo of a Single Note. Before time was measured, there was the Great Divide, a plane of perfect, silent blackness that separated reality from itself. On one side was the realm of Aethel, a kingdom of radiant geometry, structure, and unyielding order. On the other was the realm of Umbra, a domain of roiling chaos, pure potential, and endless shadow. Between them, there was only the war, a conflict so ancient its origins were no longer history, but a scar on the face of eternity. It was a war fought not with armies, but with two champions and a single terrible weapon. In Aethel, the champion was the paladin Aurelion. He was not a being of flesh, but a construct of pure will and condensed light, eternally bound to a line of cosmic energy, his bastion. His existence was a singular, agonizing purpose: to defend the prime resonator of Aethel, a crystalline heart whose rhythmic pulse was the life of his realm. To fail meant a catastrophic blow to the very concept of existence. In Umbra, his counterpart was Vorlog, a being of shifting darkness and furious energy, a sentinel of chaos, bound to his own dark bastion. He guarded the heart of the void, the swirling, gravitational center of his chaotic realm. The weapon they shared, the engine of their endless conflict, was the Nexus. It was a small, searing sphere of pure energy, a captured singularity that held the potential for both perfect creation and total annihilation. The war was simple, brutal, and absolute. The Nexus was struck, sent hurtling across the Great Divide. The opponent had to return it. Back and forth, the Nexus would fly, its speed compounding with every strike, its hum escalating from a whisper to a piercing scream. It was a relentless exchange of blows, where the slightest miscalculation meant devastation. If the Nexus passed a paladin and struck their realm's heart, a shockwave of agony would ripple through their reality. A single point of damage, 7 points, and the realm would shatter, its essence utterly extinguished. For Aurelion, every moment was an eternity of vigilance. He did not eat or sleep. He only stood, a silent, glowing sentinel, his entire consciousness a prism for the infinitesimal calculations of trajectory, spin, and velocity. The sound of the Nexus was the only music he had ever known. It was the high, whining tear in the silence, heralding its approach, the explosive crack as it impacted his bastion of light, and the low, resonant hum as he sent it screaming back into the void. He remembered, in the hazy, traumatic way one remembers a foundational wound, the 6 blows that had scarred Athel. The first had cracked the crystal spires. The third had silenced the celestial choir for a millennium. The 6th, the most recent, had struck an age ago, yet the psychic wound felt perpetually fresh. It had dimmed the light of his people, introducing the cold, foreign concept of doubt onto their perfect order. The score was 6-6. The next blow for either side would be the last. This was the precipice, an eon of unbearable tension. For centuries, the volleys had been flawless. Aurelion and Vorlog were perfectly matched, their skills honed to an impossible razor's edge. The Nexus now moved at speeds that tore at the fabric of the void. A scar of white fire ripped across the blackness in less than a heartbeat. The strain was immense. Aurelion could feel the light that composed his form begin to fray, the pressure threatening to unmake him atom by atom. He looked across the silent, infinite chasm. He could not see Vorlog, only the angry red glow of his bastion in the far distance. He was not an enemy. He was a reflection, a mirror image of Aurelion's own eternal damnation. The war had ground them both down to nothing but their function. They were no longer champions. They were paddles in a game whose rules were forgotten, playing for stakes they could no longer fully grasp. They were only the echo of a single screaming note, played over and over again. Chapter 2. A shift in the rhythm. The rhythm was everything, the familiar, terrifying cadence of the Nexus's journey. Aurelion felt its return not as a sight or sound, but as a subtle pressure against reality. He braced his bastion, channeling the pure energy of Aethel into a wall of unyielding light. The Nexus arrived. Crack. But the impact was wrong. It was heavier, poisoned with a malice that was new. The energy it shed was not clean, but jagged and septic. Vorlig was breaking the ancient rules. For the first time in a century, he had imparted a ferocious, unpredictable spin on the Nexus. It ricocheted off Aurelian's bastion, not in a straight, clean line, but at a sharp, violent angle, a rabid thing careening towards the edge of the defined battlefield. Aurelian had to move. The sensation was blasphemous. For millennia, he had been a fixed point, his movements economical, precise. Now, he was forced to slide, a desperate, shimmering streak of light along his bastion, his form groaning under the strain. He intercepted the Nexus just before it could escape, striking it with a sharp, corrective blow. The sound was off-key, a discordant clang that echoed with the taste of violation. He sent it back, but the sacred rhythm was broken. Vorlog returned it with even more spin, a chaotic wobble that made the Nexus seem to dance with madness. Aurelian felt a cold dread, an emotion he had believed himself long incapable of. Vorlog was not just playing to win, he was playing to end it all. The long, balanced precipice was over. The final assault had begun. Strike after strike, the Nexus came at him with this new, savage energy. Each impact sent a shudder of corruption through Aurelian's very essence. He was no longer a perfect defender. He was scrambling, his perfect form flickering like a dying flame. He could feel the strain on the prime resonator behind him. It pulsed with a frantic, terrified eurythmia, the collective fear of his realm flowing into him. Why? Aurelian projected the thought into the void, a question not of strategy, but of spirit. After all this time, why this dishonor? Across the chasm, he felt Vorlog's reply, not in words, but in a wave of pure, triumphant hunger. It was the joy of entropy, the deep-seated belief that all order must eventually crumble into glorious chaos. Vorlog was not just trying to score a point, he was trying to prove a philosophical truth, that in the end, chaos would always devour order. Chapter 3, The Forbidden Geometry. The relentless, chaotic assault shattered Aurelian's focus. His movements became a desperate scramble for survival. He was losing. He could feel the fine geometry of his defense fracturing under the barrage. The Nexus was no longer just a weapon. It was a carrier of Vorlog's very essence, and its chaos was a contagion. Defeated, Aurelian knew he could not win this way. Order could not simply outlast chaos. It had to overwhelm it. He had to do something he had never done. He had to think outside the straight line. During a brief lull, as the Nexus made its long journey back, Aurelian turned his consciousness inward. He reached past the sacred tenets of his duty into the forbidden archives of Athel, a psychic space of dangerous discarded ideas. He sought a heretical concept known as the echo strike, a blasphemous equation that suggested one could strike the Nexus, not just to return it, but to change its fundamental properties. An echo strike would absorb the incoming energy and release it in a harmonic wave, splitting the Nexus into two phantom echoes for a fraction of a second. The risk was profound. If miscalculated, it could shatter his bastion and leave his realm open to the final, fatal blow. The Nexus returned, wobbling with that same chaotic fury. This was his only chance. He ignored every instinct for a solid defensive block. Instead, as the Nexus neared, he reconfigured his bastion, shaping it from a flat wall into a parabolic curve, an act of sacrilege against the straight, true lines of his realm. He met the Nexus not with a percussive strike, but with a caress. He didn't block its energy. He absorbed it. The pain was excruciating, like swallowing a storm of razors. For a moment, his form of pure light was clouded with shadow. Then, with a focused scream of will, he pulsed the energy back out. For the first time in history, the Great Divide was filled with not one, but three screaming lights. The true Nexus flew straight and true down the center, scoured clean of its chaotic spin. On either side of it flew two perfect, silent echoes, phantom projections that mirrored its path. Chapter 4, A Symphony of Silence. Across the void, Vorlog recoiled. His senses, tuned for a singular threat, were overwhelmed. 3 projectiles, 1 real, 2 spectral. It was a tactic born of order, but it was deceptive, cunning. He felt a flicker of something he had never known, uncertainty. Which was real? He had only a nanosecond to decide. He committed his dark bastion to the center, striking the true nexus with a blow of pure rage. But the effort of ignoring the phantoms cost him. His return was weaker, slower. The chaotic spin was gone. Aurelian did it again. He met the returning nexus with the echo strike, once more absorbing and releasing a symphony of light. The true nexus and its 2 silent brothers flew back towards Vorlog. And again, Vorlog was forced to hesitate, to calculate, his rage giving way to a cold, frustrating focus. The nature of the war had changed. It was no longer a contest of speed and power, but a duel of philosophies fought with a weapon of light. The screaming pace of the volleys slowed. The rhythm became thoughtful, deliberate, each strike a question and each return an answer. The silence between the impacts grew longer, filled with a tension that was somehow heavier than the noise had ever been. Vorlog adapted. He began to send the nexus back with subtle arcs, trying to force Aurelian out of position. Aurelian, in turn, learned to initiate the strike from different points along his bastion. They were communicating in a new language of angles, feints, and echoes. Aurelian had thought this new strategy would be his salvation, but he soon realized his horrifying mistake. He hadn't ended the war. He had only made it more intimate, and for the first time, he felt a sliver of something akin to respect for his ancient opponent. Chapter 5. The Unraveling. The new, complex rhythm of the battle took a different kind of toll. The echo strike demanded an immense expenditure of Aurelian's own essence. Each time he absorbed the nexus, a part of its chaotic energy lingered. His form of pure light began to show imperfections, faint gray motes swirling within his brilliance. He was corrupting himself to maintain the defense. Worse, the forbidden geometry was having an unforeseen effect on the Great Divide itself. The phantom echoes, while not physically real, were ripples in the fabric of reality, phantom wounds. The perfect, clean blackness of the void began to fray. Faint, shimmering cracks, like fissures in obsidian, began to appear, screaming with the sound of tearing space-time. Vorlog saw it too. His bastion of shadow began to flicker, its energy destabilized by the harmonic waves. The war, once contained, was now bleeding out, poisoning the very space they occupied. He sent a clear, desperate pulse of meaning across the void. The game is broken. You have undone the sacred rules. The rules were a prison, Aurelian returned, his own form wavering, a path to mutual destruction. The nexus came towards him, slower than ever before. As Aurelian prepared another echo strike, a tremor shook the Great Divide. A massive crack splintered across the void, and for a horrifying, vertigo-inducing instant, Aurelian saw through it. He saw the swirling chaos of Umbra, and he saw the crystalline spires of Aethel. The barrier between the realms was failing. In a silent, shared vision of their mutual doom, they both understood. Their eternal conflict was not just destroying them, it was collapsing reality itself. The only victory was to stop playing. Chapter 6. One Final Strike. With a shared, unspoken understanding, a pact was forged across the abyss. Vorlog did not return the nexus. He simply stopped it, holding it against his bastion as the chaotic sphere writhed against his control. Across the void, Aurelian abandoned his post, an act of supreme faith and utter treason. He moved towards the center of the Great Divide. Vorlog did the same. The two champions met in the middle, the space between their realms now a spiderweb of screaming, shimmering cracks. Before them, held in a stasis field between their combined energies, was the Nexus. It pulsed malevolently, a cosmic heart that had beaten for war and war alone. They knew what they had to do. They could not destroy it. Its energy was too absolute. But they could change its purpose. They had to strike it at the exact same instant, from opposite sides. Not in opposition, but in unison. The resulting energy discharge would not be a volley, but a balanced, omnidirectional explosion that would recalibrate the cosmos. It would seal the cracks in the Great Divide, but it would also consume everything at its epicenter. It would consume them. For Aethel, Aurelian whispered, his voice a chord of pure light. For Umbra, Vorlog hissed, his voice a rush of wind and shadow. They drew back their bastions, no longer weapons, but tools of sacrifice. And then, as one, they struck. There was no sound, no crack, only a silent, blossoming flower of pure, white energy. It expanded gracefully, washing over the Great Divide. It healed the cracks in reality, pushing the two realms gently apart, sealing the wound that had festered for eons. At its heart, the nexus dissolved, its singular purpose fulfilled. Aurelian and Vorlog, the paladin of light and the sentinel of shadow, were unmade, their essence becoming the mortar that repaired the universe. In the realm of Aethel, the prime resonator gave a final, gentle chime and fell silent. In the realm of Umbra, the heart of the void ceased its furious churning. The war was over. The score would forever remain 6-6. There was no victory, no defeat. There was only the vast, profound, and perfect silence of a game that would never be played again. The two realms, scarred and saved, were finally, utterly alone, left to face a new existence in a universe without the echo of its single terrible note.
What If Gaming Stories hopes you've enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe to What If Gaming Stories to support our channel. Until next time, keep asking, what if?